Alberta's breaking point. Leaders expose Ottawa Overreach and call for big change. The province of Alberta finds itself at a pivotal moment in its history. A growing grassroots movement, represented by leaders such as Mitch Sylvester and Jeffrey Rath from the Alberta Prosperity Project, has been amplifying a deep-seated frustration felt by many Albertans. This frustration stems from what they perceive as persistent economic inequality, political marginalization, and overreach by the federal government in Ottawa. What initially began as a reaction to unfair treatment has evolved into a profound dialogue about Alberta's future, whether it can continue to thrive as part of Canada or must seek new paths. At the heart of this movement lies a strong belief in Alberta's core values: hard work, self-reliance, and limited government interference. Many Albertans feel these values are increasingly undermined by federal policies that fail to consider the province's unique economic and cultural realities. The energy sector, which drives Alberta's economy, is seen as a primary victim of Ottawa's regulatory and fiscal strategies, which critics argue prioritize political agendas over provincial prosperity. Mitch Sylvester, who was propelled into political activism during the pandemic, highlights how national lockdowns and mandates not only restricted freedoms but disproportionately damaged Alberta's oil industry, fostering widespread resentment. The COVID-19 pandemic was more than a health crisis for many Albertans. It was a moment of political awakening. Government measures such as lockdowns, mandatory vaccinations, and restrictions enforced during Jason Kenney's leadership sparked feelings of betrayal among citizens who felt that their concerns and way of life were being ignored. The sense that Ottawa, influenced by Eastern Canada's priorities, was imposing policies detrimental to Alberta's economic backbone led to an eruption of support for movements that questioned the province's place in the Federation. While some critics reduce Alberta's identity solely to its oil production, Sylvester and Rath argue the province's character is much richer. Alberta is defined by a culture of independence, entrepreneurship, and resilience, values they say align more closely with American border states than with parts of Eastern Canada. This cultural divide is perceived as a significant factor behind the political and economic tensions, fueling a growing sense that Alberta's contributions to the country are taken for granted, while its interests are sidelined. Central to this discontent is the belief that Canada's federal system has become structurally unfair to Alberta. The imbalance in representation is glaring, with Alberta holding only 6 Senate seats, while much smaller provinces in the Maritimes enjoy 30. The Supreme Court is often seen as biased toward Quebec and Ontario, consistently ruling against Alberta in disputes over federal authority and fiscal fairness. This uneven power distribution reinforces a perception that Alberta is being exploited financially, its wealth siphoned off to support other regions, with little reciprocal benefit. Efforts to reform the Federation from within have been largely unsuccessful. Constitutional rigidity and entrenched interests mean that fundamental change appears unlikely. As a result, the Alberta Prosperity Project advocates full independence. Their vision includes creating an autonomous province with its own Supreme Court, democratic institutions responsive to local needs, and a constitution prioritizing Albertans above corporate elites or federal insiders. They argue that Canada's current system is controlled by a political and economic oligarchy that undermines provincial self-determination. Financial influence is a critical concern. The Trudeau government's close ties with wealthy multinational corporations are highlighted as examples of favoritism that disadvantages Alberta. Initiatives such as the promotion of heat pumps benefiting Brookfield and tanker regulations favoring Berkshire Hathaway are cited as benefiting select Liberal-aligned business interests rather than the broader Alberta population. This dynamic fuels the narrative that federal policy serves elite interests at the expense of ordinary citizens. Polling data within the Alberta Prosperity Project's network reveals a strong appetite for independence. Over 65% of United Conservative Party members and an even higher percentage of federal Conservative voters in Alberta reportedly support the idea. They envision a future where Alberta operates as an independent nation, maintaining trade relationships but free from Ottawa's interference. The potential for a renewed economy and greater democratic accountability drives much of this enthusiasm. Business leaders across the province echo the concerns about federal hostility to Alberta's prosperity. Many CEOs and economists argue that the current political climate discourages investment and innovation, hampering growth. They emphasize the need for a low-tax, pro-growth environment, a hallmark of Alberta's past economic success. Independence, they argue, would allow Alberta to restore this environment and attract global businesses. Premier Danielle Smith has publicly demanded concessions from the federal government, but remains cautious about full separation. The Alberta Prosperity Project calls for bolder leadership. They suggest the creation of a Minister of Sovereignty Preparedness to ensure Alberta is ready to act decisively should independence become necessary. This would provide a roadmap to navigate the complex legal, economic, and social challenges involved. Financial arguments for independence are among the most persuasive. Alberta sends roughly $70 billion to Ottawa annually, but receives less than $20 billion in return. Even after accounting for the costs of independent defense forces, social programs, and Indigenous services, the province would still run a significant surplus. This could translate into immediate tax cuts of up to 55%, making Alberta a magnet for investment and talent, and providing relief to residents facing rising living costs. The Alberta Prosperity Project envisions doubling oil and gas production within a decade, transforming the province into a prosperous, business-friendly region with no income tax and minimal regulations, akin to global economic hubs like Dubai. Unlike Quebec's ambiguous 1995 referendum, Alberta's case for independence would be grounded in clear economic benefits and pragmatic governance models, creating a compelling alternative to the status quo. The movement is skeptical of federal figures such as Mark Carney, whose globalist economic policies they see as disconnected from Alberta's realities. They also criticize Pierre Poilievre, believing he merely echoes Carney's positions without offering true alternatives for the province. For many Albertans, real autonomy means having control over pensions, policing, taxes, and immigration policies to directly address pressing local challenges like housing affordability and labor shortages. Ultimately, Alberta faces a crossroads. The desire for independence is no longer fringe, but a growing mainstream perspective driven by years of perceived federal neglect and unfair treatment. Leaders like Mitch Sylvester and Jeffrey Rath urge Premier Danielle Smith to prepare proactively for this future, ensuring Alberta's sovereignty is more than rhetoric and that the province's voice and interests are firmly prioritized. The call for big change reflects a deep yearning for fairness, prosperity, and self-determination in Alberta's political landscape.